For understanding the logic behind the treatment of normal and abnormal losses, why we add abnormal loss in equivalent units and why we don't add normal loss in equivalent units, I will try to explain this to you. Here we have normal loss and we have equivalent units of 13,000, and here we have abnormal loss. When we have abnormal loss and we don't add them in equivalent units, it means we will have 12,000 equivalent units. 12,000 are those units which are completed and in process. It means they are only, you must say, the completed units which are good one. And we have not considered the abnormal lost units and normal lost units in the calculation of equivalent units. And here we use this figure for calculation of per unit cost. 57,300 total cost, which is divided among 12,000 units. It means those 12,000 units are only the good one. It means we are allocating total cost to only good ones. But when we add 1,000 over here, it means we are dividing that cost among 13,000. Those are good ones as well as lost ones. If we add these 1,000 units which are abnormal loss into our calculations of equivalent unit, it means that we are increasing the denominator of calculation of equivalent unit per equivalent unit cost. It means we are dividing 57,300 cost among all these units which are good one and which are lost one. This is the basically logic behind that. We are not spreading the cost among the good units only. We are spreading the cost and separating the cost and neutralizing the effect of those costs by adding those units in our equivalent unit calculation. So if we don't add this number in our equivalent unit, it means that we are allocating and we are calculating per unit cost according to only good units. That's why our per unit cost will be increased. Just look at this. When we divide this cost on 13,000 unit, this is 4.4077. But when we divide this cost with the 12,000 units, this is 4.7757. It means it has increased. When we exclude those units from the calculation of equivalent units, though they will increase per unit cost. And if we include them in equivalent unit, they will reduce per unit cost or maintain per unit cost on average, because we have to cost of these normal loss units on work in process as well as finished goods. That's why we exclude them from this calculation. But we include 1,000 units which are abnormal loss or lost at the end of the process, or it is normal loss but lost at the end of the process. Then we will add them in our equivalent units, because we are not charging the cost to the good units that are completed as well as in process units. So when we have to separate the loss from our good unit loss or a cost of good unit, we will add them to the equivalent units calculation. And when we have don't have to separate that loss, then we will need not to add this to our calculation of equivalent unit. If I summarize this discussion, we have two types of losses, that are normal losses and abnormal losses. And when normal loss or abnormal loss, or normal loss you may say, abnormal loss is always separated. But when normal loss is charged to good units that are completed units and work in process units, then we have not to add these normal loss units in calculation of equivalent units. But if we have to separate the loss, and charge them to the specific units or a specific account, then we have to separate that loss. And for the separation of that loss, we need to add those number of units in our equivalent units. So the calculation of equivalent units for abnormal losses and normal losses which are end of the process is same. We calculate equivalent units for normal loss which are at the end of the process and separated and charged to finished products only. We have to calculate or add those loss unit in the calculation of equivalent. But when we have a normal loss and that loss is spread over all production, whether it is good units or in finished products or in work in process, then we will not add these 500 or add these units, normal loss units, into calculation of equivalent units. Hope so you have understood this concept very well and can apply this while calculating your equivalent units.